there are two groups, or camps, if you will, that we put the warring countries of World War II into. Does anybody know what those camps are called? The Allies and the, what? The Axis powers, absolutely. So we have the Allies and the Axis countries. I want the big three of each. I want to see if you guys can think of, maybe you played Call of Duty enough that you learned this stuff, or maybe your grandpa likes watching old war movies or something. Somehow, some way, maybe you did some reading on your own. Can somebody give me one of the Allies? Go.
U.S.
The U.S. Us. Can somebody give me one of the Axis countries? Go. Germany. Can somebody give me another of either? Go. Japan. Go.
Russia.
Russia, which side?
Axis.
Axis?
Allies.
Allies. Now, that's a tough one for a lot of folks because aren't we kind of still opposed to Russia? And actually, I shouldn't say Russia. During this time, we would call it what?
Ukraine.
The USSR. The United Soviet Socialist Republics. They were the Soviets, right? They were run by the communist regime during that time. So we had the US, the USSR, Germany, and Japan. We're missing one big one from each side. Maybe somebody from this side of the room. I've got 3 people from this side of the room that are answering. Anybody over here? Maybe for the Axis side. Mamma mia!
Italy.
Again from this side.
That's what I was going to say.
Italy. And who else? What might we have been allied with during World War II? What'd you say?
UK.
The UK, which is who?
England.
United Kingdom. So basically you have the countries with the abbreviations versus the countries without. I don't know if I've ever looked at it that way before, but yeah, the Allies, they abbreviate their names, and the Axis are just simpletons, I suppose, in that regard. So, Germany was run by who? Hitler. And he was the leader of what political party?
The Nazis.
The Nazis. So we have the Nazis and we have Hitler at the head. In the United States, who's the boss? No, a little bit before Obama.
Richard Nixon.
Little before Nixon. I'll give you a hint. You could abbreviate it. What? Franklin Delano
George.
Roosevelt. FDR. Because we like to abbreviate everything on the Allied side, don't we? It just happened. I didn't plan this. And he was the leader of what party?
The Republic?
He was Democrat. Okay? All right, cool. Then we have the USSR, allied country. And one of the reasons, again, that we're like, wait, ally or Axis? Ally or Axis? Well, we are often on opposing sides with them. We would have been in this war too, except, have you ever heard the expression? I've said it before in this class. The enemy of my enemy is my...
Enemy.
No!
Ally?
No, the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Oh,
I hate
I may or may not like this group or country or person, But if they are enemies of someone that I'm also an enemy of, they might be my friend. Right? That was the case with the USSR. You have, once the war started in Europe, you have two fronts. You have the Eastern and the Western Front. On the Western Front, the Germans just demolish everybody in their path. They clear out the continent. The French played a defensive game, and they lost because of it. They should have gone on the offensive. A lot of historians think. As soon as the Germans had most of their folks in Poland attacking there, the French should have just hit them right away. Instead, they had this thing called the Phony War in the winter of 1939 into 40. Anyway, but the USSR was the only power on the Eastern Front. On the Western Front, you had the British trying to hold out, and then eventually, once we came into the war, we were also on the Western Front. The Russians were the only power holding them in on the other side. So we were absolutely friends with them because as long as the Russians could hold on in the East and keep fighting the Germans, there'd be less forces that Germany could direct against us, yes? Germany fighting a two-front war kept them weaker than if they could just focus on one side or the other. That was a mistake on Hitler's part, deciding, hey, we're going to go ahead and try to have a two-front war. But he was a little confident. So, anyway, who was the leader of the Soviet Union? Last name started with an S. Not abbreviate. I'm not going to abbreviate this. I guess I could. Oh, it's JS. I don't know his middle name. Joseph Stalin. Yes.
Joseph.
J. Stalin. And he was of what political persuasion? He was a communist. Ooh, if I can spell communism, I'll just say com. Com-dot. We'll keep abbreviating. Okay. And Japan. What about Japan? You guys are putting this in your notes, right? Japan. Who was the leader of Japan? This is a tricky question, a little bit. What do you think?
Leader of Japan.
Yeah, who was the leader of Japan? So they had, so okay, let's do UK, and then we'll come back to Japan. The Queen.
No, it wasn't her.
Elizabeth.
There was a king too, wasn't there at that time? There was actually a king.
Elizabeth. It wasn't Elizabeth. The first one.
It was Henry.
Shh. But was that the actual leader in a monarchy, a modern monarchy in the UK? Does the monarch hold political power?
No.
Not so much as the who. The prime
Minister.
The prime minister. Does anybody know who the prime minister of the United Kingdom was for most of the Second World War?
Come on, Angela. Just come on, Angela.
Have you ever heard of Churchill?
Yeah.
Winston Churchill.
Winston Churchill. Oh, that's right. Churchill. Is it Churchill or Churchill?
Churchill.
I don't know. Anyway, and I don't know which political party he was a member of, actually. That might be a Googleable one. If somebody wants to Google what party was Winston Churchill. Remember. So somebody look that up for me. Now, in Japan, you also have a political system where you have kind of like a monarch, but he was called an emperor. So you had Hirohito, Emperor Hirohito. But depending on who, this is one of those pieces of history that when you investigate further, you're like, well, did he not have a lot of power, or did he? I mean, so it was shared power, perhaps. What?
In Germany, what are the two parties now? Because it's not Nazi.
No idea. They've got more than two, I can tell you that. I mean, so do we. Yeah, I'm not socialist, There's a lot of different socialist parties in Germany right now. There's Labour,
Churchill was
probably.
Conservative Party.
Conservative Party? Okay.
Yeah.
Alright, cool. So anyway, so in Japan, we have Emperor Hirohito, if I'm spelling that right, I don't know. But, I'm going to put a slash there, and most historians, it's starting to shift this way, but a lot of the power was actually with Tojo. I made that second O look like a heart. I don't actually love this guy. Tojo. And he held more of the political power. He was a military leader. Okay? And I know you'll see pictures of the emperor wearing a military style uniform too, but Tojo he was older, he had more military experience, and Hirohito actually worked to get him in power. So they were absolutely pretty firm allies. After the war, there was a large effort to place more of the blame on Tojo for those war decisions, basically to save the emperor's life. Because after the war, the Japanese committed a lot of war crimes, a lot of atrocities against other human beings. And this guy ended up hanging for it. They executed Tojo. But because so much of the blame was placed on Tojo, and a lot of it rightly so, it diverted the blame away from the emperor, which part of that reason was to basically make the surrender more friendly. Imagine how the Japanese populace would have felt if we executed their god emperor. Probably not a good happy place, yeah. So anyway, so that's Italy, or Japan. Next up is Italy. Anybody know who ran the show in Italy? Mussolini. And I don't know the spelling. Mussolini?
Moose.
Maybe? Question mark? Not question mark, did he rule it? He was the dude. He was the dictator. And I'm not sure what his political party was called. He was a fascist, but do you have it?
Yep.
What do you got?
Mussolini.
Yeah! I guess I'm the only one excited that I spelled that. Thank you! I'm very excited. Political party. Do you have the political party?
1 second.
Since you've got your Google machine up. The thing that these...
I don't know how to say it.
Oh, spell it.
Fascist.
Fascist. He was a fascist. Cool.
Fascist.
Nazis are called fascists too. It's like a category you lump basically it's a political way of thinking that you've got a very powerful central government, an authoritative regime. The legislature doesn't really have much power anymore. They kind of go along with whatever the dictator wants. And then the businesses aren't nationalized entirely, but they're supported by the government. They're like in cahoots with the corporations. So anyway, yeah. So dates. Gosh, I'm taking up a lot of time. Dates. We got a timeline. Let's do a timeline. When did the war end? What year? We'll just go with years. 19. Would have been what? 78 years ago. The end of World War II. 44?
45?
45.
45.
1945 was the end of the war, both in Europe and in Japan, earlier in Europe, later in Japan. And it began, for most historians, they would say the World War started in 1939 with the German invasion of Poland. Of course, fighting in different parts of the world had already been occurring. The Italians in Ethiopia, the Japanese in Manchuria, China. So yeah, there was already fighting going on that continued through the war. So don't get that twisted. When did the U.S. join the war?
1943.
What? 41 with what? What event?
Pearl Harbor.
Pearl Harbor.
Yep. Japan attacks Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 41. And Roosevelt called it the day that would live in infamy. Okay, so that's the time frame that we're talking about. From 39 until the attack on Pearl Harbor, did the American population want to go to war in general?
No.
No, and you're going to see a couple interviews in this film where they're like, we don't want any part of it. That's not our war. So that's kind of where we start in World War II. The fighting's already begun, and America's like, we don't really want to be part of that. Now, we supported the Allied side with some supplies, some weapons, food, clothing, that sort of thing. But we weren't putting boots on the ground. We did have a volunteer force. We had volunteers in China fighting against the Japanese. Anybody ever heard of the Flying Tigers as an example? The Flying Tigers, absolutely. A couple good movies made about it. We had shipments of goods going to Russia. We had volunteer flyers in Britain fighting against the Nazis. So we were involved, but it wasn't like we hadn't declared war, you know.